Welcome to the podcast. My name is Pastor Kevin Robertson, and this is a special podcast, a really unique podcast. And let me share with you. We all have Facebook friends, and we all project this kind of image that we want people to believe that we're actually living. And then I saw this one on somebody's, what would you say, somebody's wall. And I go, man, this is Jay Martinez. And I was thinking, it's going to therapy is cool. And she posted this on November 4th, and I thought, okay, this girl is comfortable with who she is. She's very comfortable, and she's accepted on how far she's come. So I thought, okay, I'm going to speak to her today. So let me introduce you. This is Jay Martinez. And welcome, Jay, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And so, listen, before we go into the podcast, I'm super stinking proud of you. I think you've come a long way. And so let's go from the beginning, the beginning when you were born, okay? Or not even that, but tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about your parents and your brother.
And my brothers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was raised in the church.
Okay.
I was a pastor's kid. So that's kind of definitive of who I was growing up. My dad was the pastor of Herman Church, and that was like the community church. Like even in my elementary school, like the teachers knew who my dad was, the kids knew who my dad was. Wow. Even in middle school, like it was like, I mean, Herman was very small, and Highland Park isn't that big either, so everyone kind of knew who I was. So that was always really interesting to me.
Well, let's explore that. If it was really interesting, when you were part of Herman Church, you began to. How old were you when Manny, your dad, took the lead? Or no, how old were you when he did? Because your dad was associate pastor, and then he became the senior pastor.
Yes, I believe my dad became the associate pastor. I must have been like 5, maybe.
5, okay.
My mom was pregnant with my little brother when we moved to the house.
Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah. So you're talking about a long time. So, and the thing is, this is what I've been told, because I'm a pastor's kid. We're messed up.
Yeah.
We really got some issues here. And so now, I don't know if it's true with you, but when you grew up, did you feel like you were lived in this bubble of expectations or what you should be?
Oh, absolutely. Even after.
Oh, really? See, that's crazy, because the thing is, it's just because you get to the point of projecting, like I'm projecting what I think you need me to be. And so therefore there's an emptiness inside of me that I just cannot deal with, or I cannot express. Did you go through that too?
I mean, there was definitely a part of that stood with me. But it was also just this like kind of like perfectionist like mindset that it left me with. Like I always felt like somebody was watching me. Like I always felt like I had my own image to like uphold. Like I know my dad always told me, like he always felt like, all eyes were on him, and he had this like image to protect, like being the pastor. Right. But I feel like that kind of trickled down to me too. Yeah. I mean, especially not just being like the pastor's kid, like, I was the pastor's daughter, and that's a whole other ball game right there. So yeah, I mean, it always left me with this like this sense of just like, I need to be like on it. I need to be on my game. Like, it's like, I feel like whether like it's just, being at church on Sundays, or like my academics, or like what I'm choosing to do like outside of my church activities. Like I felt like somehow like somebody was gonna know, and that was, I don't know, like it put a lot of pressure on me for sure. And like even to the point where it's like on my social media and stuff, like I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I can't post this, or if I post this, like someone's gonna tell my parents. Like it's like having 1,000 parents is what it felt like.
No, I get it, because there's things I don't post because I'm going to be judged for it, or I'm going to have, this these people that are not going to like it. So I'm very cautious on what I post. I'm very cautious on my views and stuff, because even to the point when you become a pastor like myself, there is an expectation that everyone has of what a pastor should be. And it's really interesting, because what I have tendency to do is I try to be myself, but half the people don't like it. And they try to conform you into an image that they think you need to be. And so, okay, let me ask you this. How did that skew your relationship with God?
Um, I just feel like it made it almost not genuine.
Mhm.
Like, it felt like even when I was alone, I was putting on a performance for myself.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
it got to that point, like, where it felt like I have to, follow in my dad's footsteps, like, or
Mhm.
even, like, my mom's footsteps to an extent, because she was,
Right,
a youth pastor. So it felt like I need to be like them, and, like, I am an extension of them. So when
right,
people see, how, like, holy and godly, like, my parents are, they are gonna
right,
expect the same thing, like, from their kids.
right.
So it got to a point where I felt like, when I would speak in church, or, like, when I would, talk to people, like, I had to mimic that
Mhm.
same persona, to the point where I didn't even know how to really have a relationship with God on my own,
Right,
because I felt like it was just very performative. Like, even, like, when I was with myself, like, I found myself, like, saying things or writing things, like, if I was
right.
journaling or whatever, like, just like being somebody that even deep down I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you, like, saying this? Because I felt like I had to.
Yeah. No, and the thing is, when I was your age, I mean, how old are you? I should say.
21.
Okay, I think I was 19, 20 when I got to the point where I just said, screw God. I'm done with God. I'm done with this projection. And I remember telling my dad this, that I would prefer to go to hell than go to heaven with these people, because these people are a bunch of hypocrites.
Mm.
And I just, now nobody, I'm on my own on that one, when I said I would prefer to go to hell. But it got to the point where I was just done with this performance. I was done with this hypocrisy. I was just done. And, I would go to an altar call just because there's an expectation. Kevin, you need, this is time to go to the altar. Or when I was baptized, my baptism was all performance.
Mhm.
There's no authenticity in my baptism. And so let's go to the point where about the picture showed up. Did this start to mess with your head in a way? When did you know? When did you come to the point where you're going, okay, I have some mental problems here? And did you? Because I would assume you get to the point where you're just, I'm not accepting this. I
Mhm.
can't accept this. I don't want to accept this, because this is a sign of, like, I'm messed up. So did you realize that you were getting to the
Um,
point of just,
so okay, so when I was in the 5th grade,
okay,
I was 9 years old. I was getting bullied, like, a lot, like,
okay,
a lot. And
that's terrible.
yeah, and so at only, like, 9 years old, I thought, I'm gonna start cutting myself. Um,
Oh,
and
cutting yourself.
yeah, so when
Okay,
that happened, I developed this, like, really, really bad habit, but I was still going to church.
okay.
And it kind of, I think that's the point where things started, like, really getting confusing for me,
Hmm.
because it almost felt like I wasn't allowed to feel what I was feeling, especially, like, being in the position that I was in. And so it kind of started, I guess that's where, like, the sense of, like, hypocrisy came from, like the sense of, like, looking at everybody like, how can you even, like, say, you're so, like, godly and holy,
Right.
when in reality, if I were to, like, come forward with this, like, you all would look at me like I'm crazy, and, like, that's, like, not okay. So I think that's kind of the point where I started, if anything, I feel like I became even more performative at that point. And I feel like I can almost like recall like
Mhm.
just how crazy performative like I was getting. And everyone looked at me like, wow, you know, she's like so in love with God now and this and that. But in reality, like I was really struggling. But I felt like I wasn't allowed to talk about it, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to express that either because it was just so far from what I was being told was like right. And like in the crowd that like was at the church, I mean, it was like a bunch of like older white people, like, and so it's like what do I have in common with them as
Right.
like a 9-year-old girl?
Right.
But everything that I was feeling and experiencing was everything that was being preached that like, oh, you know, God will fix, and if you love God, like you're gonna be like okay.
Yeah.
So it became very like, oh, so am I not like, am I not like good enough then? Like, am I
And
not
how old were you?
really?
How old were you then?
I was like 9.
Okay, so 9 years old, you're in this performance based thing, and you're almost getting to the point where isolation is the norm for you, and you're just going, okay, I can't do this, and so it's almost to the point where, in a sense, you just you go inward, and man, when I go inward, it gets crazy in my head. I'm telling you right now, you know. And so, did you get to the point where you're just going, okay, this is a spiral that's just heading down now? And you're only 9 years
Yeah.
old. And let me ask you this: cutting, okay? Why cutting? I mean, what's because I mean, I was bullied when I was 9. I was called bongo lips, big lips, moving earthquake. I was, because of my lips. But where it got to the point of cutting, I never got that far because I didn't know what cutting meant. Did you? What made you decide?
I
Hey, let me cut
mhm.
myself.
I think just because I mean, at the time, like, you know, I was in 5th grade, that was, like, the thing that people talked about, like, "Oh, that kid is emo," or like, "Oh, this kid does this,"
Okay.
and people would always say, like, "Oh, it's because, you know, they're so depressed. Oh, because they're so sad," like, "Oh, this and that," and so it kind of put this image in my head, like, "Oh, well, like, I'm sad and, like, I'm depressed, like, I don't have friends, so I guess
Right.
that's what I'm supposed to do," and then so, like, that's kinda how it started. But the thing is, like, and this is why I get really almost defensive when people would be like, "Oh, well, people who cut just cut for attention." It's
Okay.
like, yeah, that's probably how it starts, but like, think of how like sad that is that somebody like is so desperately craving like, you know, like love and affection and like somebody to notice them that they would do that. Because
Right.
that's almost how it started for me. Because all of a sudden I started cutting myself, and it's almost like all of a sudden people started to notice me and be like, hey, like I think like, yeah, I think she's going through something, like,
Right.
hey, like I want to ask her about it.
Right.
And that was the one time like all year that it felt like people were finally starting to talk to me.
Right.
So but then I mean from there then it just develops into this like addiction that, you know, it just it sits with you, and it stays there, and it becomes this like really unhealthy coping mechanism. But I
Wow.
mean, it all started because people finally noticed me, like, when I did it, and I thought that that's what you're supposed to do when you're sad.
Okay. It's okay. That just fascinates me. It really does. And so you got to the point of cutting yourself. Now, when did your dad Manny or your mother Darlene, when did they start noticing, or did they ever notice?
The first time that it came up, I was in I think I was in 7th grade. Yeah, I
Mhm.
was in 7th grade. Um, and 7th grade was a whole year for
Oh,
me.
it's a horrible
Um,
year. It's junior high.
yeah, but in 7th grade, I get so at this point, like, it had been like 2 years since I started self-harming. So at this point, it wasn't just like, "Oh, people are like liking me if I do." Like at
Right.
this point, it was like a really unhealthy coping mechanism, and I started shying away from like, "Oh yeah, like people know," like to be like, "Just
Right.
no, don't talk to me. Like I'm gonna hide it. Like it's
Right.
just like it's my thing now." But I was in class and I started trying to scratch myself with like a paper clip or something. And the teacher saw me, and because teachers are mandated reporters, she
Okay.
reported it to the magnet coordinator, and then the magnet coordinator called my parents.
Okay.
And I remember that day too because I was at lunch and I could see her like following me around. like trying to get my attention, but I was like, oh
Right,
my God, like I don't want to like do this right now.
right, right.
But then sure enough, in my next period, they called me to the office. I went to the office. My parents were there.
Okay,
So that was when they kind of found out about it.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Now you're gonna because let me just go back in this conversation. You said, and I just was getting the impression you were going to say, "Hey, the seventh grade was awful, and this is why it was awful." And I interrupted you on it. So, did something happen when you were in seventh grade to cause this or to move?
When I was in seventh grade, I was in an extremely abusive relationship um, with a friend of mine,
Okay.
and it's always really interesting because like when I say that, people are like, "You were 12, like what do you mean? Like
Right.
that doesn't happen,"
Right.
but it does. And this was it was so toxic too because it was so back and forth. I'm not even kidding. Like for a year, it was, like we're best friends. Like this is my best friend. Like we do
Right.
everything together. We talk to each other. Like when people think of one of us, they think of the other one. And then like a switch, like, he'd be like, hey, I actually like you. Like you want my
Mhm.
girlfriend. And then from that, it would switch to, I don't like you. Nobody likes you because I don't like you. And then it got physical too. Like he would push me and he would like bend my fingers backwards. And it ended because he actually choked me and I told one of my youth leaders, and then one of my youth leaders told my parents.
Right.
So seventh grade was a time
Yeah,
for me.
it's almost to the point where you go from fifth grade, you're going, okay, I don't like myself. I started cutting myself. Then you get in this relationship, friendship, whatever it was, that basically he's telling you what you already think about yourself. It's like reinforcing, this downward spiral. Did you get to the point of just saying, I'm done, I'm suicide? Did you think that? Did that cross your
Oh,
mind?
absolutely, all the time.
That's horrible. So did you get to the point of trying to do suicide or just fantasize about it?
I never really attempted it. I think because I was too scared. Um, and I'm not. I mean, it sounds so like contradictory because I said like I started cutting myself because I wanted the attention. But I
Right.
mean, after a while, like I didn't want that attention anymore. If anything, I just wanted people to leave me alone because it felt
Yeah.
like when people started coming in, things started getting harder. So I was too scared of the attention it would cause, especially if I didn't do
Right.
it right. So I never really like thought, well, I mean, that's a lie. I definitely had times where I'm thinking like, okay, this is like what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna just do it, and then I end up like putting myself to sleep or something, and then I wake up the next day. It's like, okay, well, I guess that wasn't it.
Yeah.
So it definitely was a it was seventh grade was a really, really, really dark time for me. And it was always just, especially like when things were good, especially with this guy, because this
Mhm.
guy took up my whole seventh grade year.
Right.
When things were going good, I felt okay. And then when things would switch, things would be really, really bad.
Right.
So I mean, I definitely spiraled down to that point, but it never got to the point where I was like, I'm gonna do this.
Right. So Jay, when did you get to the point where you just realize I'm worth more than how this guy's treating me? I'm better than. Did you get to a point where you just said, I'm cutting this, I'm done with this, I'm not this person? Or did he break up with you? When did you have the aha moment? When,
I mean, the truth is, I never really did.
okay,
The only reason, so for one, if we broke up, it was because he broke up with me. And it was usually because he's like, oh, I like somebody else. Like, it's like, sorry, and then come back. And
yeah,
it was never me because I was so incredibly brainwashed and like in love with this guy. So I was
yeah,
just like, okay, well, I'll be here. Um, yeah, I mean, the truth is, like, I never really was like, oh, I'm worth more than this. Because if anything, I thought it was exactly what I deserved.
okay,
The only reason it ended again was because when he choked me, I told somebody, and they told my parents, and they moved me to a different program in the school,
okay,
and it kind of just like cut it like right there. So it was never so much that I'm like, I overcame this and like I'm better than this.
right.
It was kind of like, yeah, we're gonna like separate you, and like that's that. So
Okay, let me get to the point. I know your dad, Manny. I know him really well, and I look at you as like a daughter. I think I would go ballistic. I would just kill this guy. Even as a pastor, because when I'm hearing this, I'm getting starting to get real angry and go, Okay, you want to choke? You want to see what choking's like? So, how did your dad? How did your father deal? I mean, when I'm just hearing this for the first time, and I'm going, "Ooh!" I mean, how did? Do you remember how your dad responded or reacted?
I mean, honestly, I'm sure he was like, I'm sure he was
Okay.
like beyond angry behind closed
Yeah.
doors. But I mean, when he was talking to me, he was more sad, and I mean, I understand why. Like, I'm his
Yeah.
daughter, and I was only 12. So it was more of like a hurt
Right.
when he was dealing with me. But then on the outside, oh, of course he was livid, like he was
Yeah.
mad. And I mean, to be fair, like most of the guys in my life were like my youth leader, Austin, who I'm sure you've met at some point. He was the first person I told, and then he told Bowman, and
Uh,
Bowman's the one who told my dad. So all of these people in my life were just
yeah.
like livid for me,
Okay.
but I don't think anybody wanted to show me that part of it.
No, no, and you know what? Your dad handled it right. Going to you, because then if you start yelling, then you start internalizing, like you're letting your dad down and stuff. So he probably handled it correctly. So let's move on. When did you realize that? Because this is where walked. I visited you, and when you were in the mental, when you went, and I don't even know how to word it. What was the
When
place
I
you
was
were in?
inpatient.
The impatient. I gotta be very careful how I say that. When did your parents decide to put you in, or did you decide, or what was the lead up to that?
So I was hospitalized twice,
Okay.
and I believe you came on the first time I was hospitalized. I think you called me the second time, but I believe you came in the first time I was there.
Okay.
Pretty much what had happened is, so this was sophomore year of high school. Sophomore year was another really, really bad year. I had a lot of bad years. But sophomore year was another really bad year for me because I was in this incredibly toxic friendship group. So it was taking a toll on me.
Right.
And I was self-harming a lot my sophomore year, like a lot worse than when I had first started. Like it was really, really
Right.
bad. So I had I was taking a shower one night and I was cutting myself and I left my blade in the bathroom and I didn't realize it. So I was in my room, I was doing homework, and I think it was my dad. My dad called me from the room, from his
Mhm.
room. So I went in there and he was holding it, and my mom was like, she literally was just like, show me where. So it was on my stomach. So I lifted up my shirt and I showed her, and they took me to the ER. And from the ER, they actually weren't going to hospitalize me
Okay.
because she was the nurse, the triage nurse was pretty much just like, well, it's not that deep. Like she doesn't need stitches. Like
Right.
it's not like a medical problem.
Right.
But my mom, of course, like she's being protective. She's like, well, this isn't normal. Like, what are you gonna do about it?
Right.
So the nurse asked me. She's like, I think what she meant to ask was like, were you trying to kill yourself?
Right.
Like was this a suicide attempt? But instead she worded it something along the lines of like, are you considering suicide, or like, do you want to die, like something that was more like vague.
Right.
So I said yes anyways, because the truth is I was really suicidal. I wasn't
Right.
trying to kill myself in that
Right.
moment, but I was still suicidal.
Right.
So because of that, they kept me in the ER. They put me on a 5150. I had to wait overnight for a social worker to come see me, and then from there they put me inpatient. The second time was voluntary, and that was voluntary on my end, but this time was not voluntary.
Well, no, no, because it's interesting. Because let's say you started cutting yourself in fifth grade, so you got sixth grade, seventh grade. You had this crappy year, and that went so. And then eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, you're still cutting yourself, not just on the wrist, but on the stomach as well, right?
It was my stomach, my thighs, my shoulders. Like to this day, I still have scars everywhere.
So you get to the point where now, when you were hospitalized, did you get anything? Did you learn anything about self-harm, self-care? Or were you just going through it the first time? Let me just go through the motions to get out of this.
The first time was definitely like going through the motions,
Okay.
but I mean also like this was something that was really new for my parents.
All right.
Like they had never had a kid like go inpatient in a
Like you.
hospital.
Okay.
And I mean, for them, and I mean, I love my parents to death, and I don't blame them for everything.
Right,
Like I
right.
understand it was a hard time, but I mean, just because like like I feel like because my dad had spent so long like pleasing people, like trying to be like this kind of person, that still stuck with him to
Mhm.
the point where when I was in the hospital, it was a lot of like, well, you don't need to be here, right? Like, oh, you're not like these other kids. Like
Okay.
you're, and it's like in my head, I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I am. Like, I actually am.
Right,
But because I was like internalizing that, I was kind of just like putting on another performance. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna get out of here, and like that's gonna be that.
right. Now,
So,
do you think if your dad wasn't, you categorize it as a people pleaser or a pastor, do you think he would have dealt with it differently?
I
Like
mean,
in a sense,
mhm,
you were a performer and he was a performer,
yeah.
right?
I mean, I think so. Because I mean, here's the thing, like especially because like my mom deals with mental illness. I feel like my dad was so scared to deal with that because of how the church had dealt with it.
Yeah,
So my dad held on to this like almost like fear of like mental illness and like mental issues. And I feel like if anything, it was more out of like fear that he didn't want me to come out that way. So he was more trying to like pretend that it wasn't as severe as it was and trying
right,
to like isolate himself from the idea that like I could become like my mom.
right. Because your mother struggles with mental illness too. And so we get to the point where it's almost to the point of the pastor. And I love Manny. I just think he's a dear guy, and he had such a big heart.
Yeah.
And so you get to the point where, do I deal with my daughter and not worry about the church and what they think, or do I balance what the church is telling me? Because the church is really, they're thinking of mental health is, you got to pray it out. You got to
Yeah.
just accept Jesus and do this, and then that mental health will be going. And so you buy into that stupid image, and
Yeah.
you just go, no, I'm not. I got a chemical imbalance in my brain here that I need to get on the meds. I need this. It's not just, I need to work through this.
Mhm.
I need to face it. So I'm assuming the second time you went into, when you were hospitalized, you kind of said, okay, I need to do this for me. Because
Yeah.
you just said, I volunteered to do that. So it got to the
Yeah.
point, the first time you said, I'm going through the motion. And the second, what happened in the second time where you took it seriously?
Um, I mean, the second time, I don't really know what was so different the second time. I think I had just been trying to like, I don't know, like just be more in control of myself. And I mean, after you self-harm for so long, it's almost like you get really tired of yourself doing it because you get to a point where you're like, why am I even doing this? But you can't stop yourself because
Right,
I mean, like my therapist tells me, like it's an addiction. Like it's not like it's something that's so glamorized and something that's so like looked over as like a petty thing, but it literally becomes an addiction. So I mean, I was getting really tired of it, and I wanted to like have more control over myself. And one night I don't remember why I had probably gotten in like a fight with my friends, the same toxic friend group. This was only like 2 3 months later maybe.
yeah.
But I was trying to take apart a razor, like a shaving razor. I was trying to take it apart so that I could cut myself with the blade,
Uh,
and I had gotten like a cut like under my nail from trying to take it apart. And when I got that, I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I even doing this? But I was living with my grandparents at the time, and my parents were living in a trailer with my uncle because we hadn't been able to like afford our apartment or something like that a couple months prior. So we were living separate.
right.
And I didn't know how to tell.
But this is right after your dad ended up resigning. Um,
This was about 2 years after my dad resigned.
okay. Now, one thing, I was part of your dad's resignation,
Hmm.
uh, where I kind of sat in with him, and your dad, I'm telling you, he is a man with integrity,
Yeah.
because I mean, I remember when he handed his ordination and told the superintendent, I need you to be my pastor. And that superintendent never called him. So it's almost to the point where you're going, okay, I'm just watching this going, okay, this guy is screaming out help. This guy doing this, and then nobody. I mean, your dad just made it clear. This is how I need. This is what I need, and who I need. And it just gets to the point where, again, the system, because the denomination systematics, the system needs to change. Because we project. See, now I'm getting all mad. Because the system within the denomination or within churches encourage you to project rather than being authenticity, whatever that word is. I'm so mad.
Authentic.
Authentic. Because the thing is, this is where I think if it wasn't for, and this is just me, the church, if the church responded in the caring, compassionate way, would you been healed, or would you have been working through this when you were in 6th grade? Would you have been avoided the 7th? Would you avoid the sophomore if the church was more accepting and caring?
I mean, I think I would have been more comfortable expressing like how I was feeling. That would have been part of it. But I mean, there's also like, and I say this with like zero like harsh feelings towards my dad. Like I understand, like,
Right.
this was his job, this was his living, but it took up so much of his like time and his emotions that it got to a point where it's almost like I feel like he didn't even really notice.
Yeah.
So I feel like I felt like I was living with my pastor, like rather than living with my dad most of the time. So I didn't really get a chance to like have my dad, it feels like. I mean, especially too because my dad was handling the issues with my mom and like handling the issues of the church, especially when we were getting closer to leaving, because that was a whole thing. So I feel like that was another big part of it. Like I feel like the church didn't allow him to be a dad, and that's what kept me wanting to internalize it so much, because I felt like it was my responsibility to protect him from me, if that even makes sense. Like I felt like I had to be sure that I wasn't another one of those burdens on his plate. Like I felt like I needed to take care of myself because I wasn't going to put that on anybody else, like least of all like my parents.
Yeah, and again, you isolate yourself. Okay. I can tell like I'm really getting all frustrated here just in this interview. So then it gets to the point where, and what year was this happening?
Sophomore year was when I was hospitalized.
Okay. So then you met your current boyfriend.
Yeah.
Okay. And now obviously there was some healing that was taking place, because he's much different than the other ones that you've had, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me how you met him and what makes him different. Because obviously he's not choking or abusing you or anything like that. What makes this relationship a lot different than your previous relationships? Because you've been with this guy 5 years now, right?
Yeah, it'll be 6 in February.
Yeah. And let me tell you too, you guys like Disneyland, don't you?
Yeah.
I've noticed, because this is Disneyland. Every picture you have with this guy, it's somewhere in Disneyland, or you have Mickey Mouse ears.
Yeah, he got really excited because he had only ever been to Disneyland like once. And so when I think it was last year, we were like, oh my God, you know what? We can afford it. Like, let's get Disney passes. So he was like a little kid. So we were always going to Disneyland together because he was so excited. But it was really cute. So
what's his name? And
his name is Abram.
Abram. And how does Abram treat you compared to that knucklehead? Is there better be a difference?
Yes.
Okay.
Abram treats me so great. I'm so spoiled. Like
and you should be. And so this relationship obviously is one of the healthiest relationships that you've had, because I've had the privilege of meeting him a couple of times. So let me ask you this. Okay, you've gone through some hard times. Okay, I wasn't going to say hard times. I was going to say the S word. But you've gone through this difficult times, and fifth, about projecting about, image about the church and stuff like this, and boom, boom, boom. How has your perception changed within the church? Are you still, I don't know, are you still saying, yes, I'm a Christian, or are you just done with it? Are you involved in the church? Are you just done with that? Where are you? And I want you to be open, because I'm not looking for this great, perfect little story that, and stuff like this. So what's your perception of God now?
I mean, I feel like, so obviously when my parents like split up and my dad put in his resignation,
Right.
it was very, very difficult. And I definitely went through my phase of like, why am I even like bothering with this anymore? Like, I'm not like I'm tired of being performative. Now I have absolutely no reason to, because I mean I'm not like the pastor's kid anymore. I don't care about that.
Right.
So it was, I don't know. I guess I went through my phase where it wasn't even like, oh, like I don't believe in God, this and that. It was just more like I don't care to like maintain it. Like
Right.
it's whatever. It is what
Right.
it is. I felt no interest in it. But I feel like after a while, I feel like I was able to come to terms with things like on my own.
Okay.
Like I was able, and when I say like after a while, I mean I'm talking like even like up until I was in college, because I feel like these past couple of years have finally been like my opportunity to like really figure things out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's gotten to the point where now like I can take myself to church and I can pick what church I want to go to.
Right.
So I feel like I mean as horrible as like all of these things were and
Yeah.
this, that, and whatever, it's actually really funny. I wrote about all of this for one of my college essays because I applied to a Christian university. So it's just funny repeating it. But anyways,
What was the
I feel
title?
like I applied to CBU as one of the schools for my grad program.
Okay.
So one of the things is it has you write about like, oh, like what is your relationship with God? Like what's your history and da da da. I was like, well, let me tell you.
Yeah, you're gonna get an earful now.
Yeah. But I mean, the bottom line of that though is that, despite everything, being able to kind of break that pastor kid mold
Right.
was the best possible thing for me, because now I feel the most like genuine in my faith that I've ever been. Like I don't feel so like I have to go to church every Sunday and I have to know the Bible off the top of my head, because believe me, I don't. But
Right.
it's like I feel like now I get to have a relationship with God based on like my own values and my own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I don't feel so ashamed to believe what I believe. Like I'm a huge supporter of like the LGBT community, and I am a huge like advocate for social justice issues. Like those are the things that are important to me, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Right.
And I don't feel like I have to compromise my faith anymore because of like who's looking at me.
Right.
So if anything, I'm in like the best place that I've been, because I've had so much time to like work on it. I've had so much time to kind of be able to think for things like for myself.
Right. And your generation too is I believe your generation is a generation that's going to change the world, because you have such a deep sense of justice, and I think that's so important to have. So let me go back, because not only that you were cutting yourself, you're very educated too now, and so, or I should say, educated. But tell me about it, because you just kind of highlighted you're in a like when did you graduate from college? You graduated from college, right?
I graduated from college in June.
June. Congratulations. And
Thank
now
you.
with God, see, I didn't know that. So the thing is, what did you graduate with?
Oh no, I'm graduating this June. So I'm
Oh, this
finishing
June.
up my last like I think I have 7 more classes.
Okay. And what will you graduate with?
My BA in sociology.
Oh, see, that's cool, because I honestly believe that the Lord can you can take your greatest pain and make it one of your greatest ministry. And so that's powerful. And then you're applying for a different college, right?
Yeah, so I'm applying to grad schools right now. I'm applying to get my MSW, so my Master
That's
of Social Work.
crazy. I am so stinking proud of you.
Thanks.
Can you be my daughter? No, just yeah, forget Manny, forget Darlene. So, man, I know that is so, because the thing is why I'm so proud of you. You've had this crappy life that just was one thing after another, and somehow you just made it, and you made something out of yourself. And you're in this healthy relationship, things are going well, and your relationship with God is probably more authentic than it ever was. And you're just pursuing your compassion, which I think is crazy. So let me ask you this. I think you posted something on Facebook on November 4th. I don't know if I read this. Let me see. Do you remember what you posted on November 4th? Here, let me. Oh, come on, Kevin. Obviously, you would think I would know how to do this. And so, let's see. November 4th. Okay, so you posted this picture, and you said, in midst of all the wilderness, please remember to take a moment to take care of your mental health. Whether you've been working through something for a long time or just wish you had someone to listen, therapy is super dope. There's zero shame in looking for support. Stay safe, friends. And then you add hashtag election 2020, hashtag self-care for everyone, hashtag mental awareness. So obviously you're passionate about mental awareness and health now. And so let me ask you this. If somebody's listening to this and going, they're struggling with cutting themselves, they're struggling with self-image, they're in an abusive relationship, you know, I mean, the whole thing, what got you to the point of saying, I've got to change? Because I know it would be neat. What kind of advice can you give somebody that would say, okay, that something can click in their head that I go, okay, I'm going to change my life here?
I think that the most important thing to keep in mind, like even when you're gonna start this like road to recovery, is that it's not glamorous. And I think like that sounds like you'd be like, so why is that encouraging? But I mean, it's important to know, because I feel like like these like things like, you know, mental illness and like body image, like all of this stuff, like it's so romanticized to the point where people like, when you start this road to recovery, when you want to reach out to a therapist for the first time, or you want to see a psychiatrist, like whatever, or even just like telling a friend about your struggles,
Right.
like it's hard, like it's not easy, and it's not something that goes away overnight. Like I'm 21 years old and I'm still figuring out my mental illness. Like I just got a new diagnosis in January. Like it's a long process.
Oh, really?
And I feel like people, when you don't know that and things get hard very
Right.
quickly, it makes you want to turn away because you feel like you're doing something wrong, or it makes you feel like you're struggling, or you're worse off than anybody else, like you can't be helped. Like you get all of these negative thoughts and images in your head
Mhm.
because nobody's real about how hard it is to like recover from these things.
Right.
But I feel like if you go into this knowing it's not going to be easy, or like it's not going to be like some beautiful like storybook journey, it gives you some validation, and it gives you some feeling of like, okay, you know, like I'm not alone in this, because you know this person, like, you know, they told me up front, like, you know, I've heard her story, and it wasn't easy, like it's still something that you're working through. So when you have that validation and you have that like confirmation, it's almost like comforting, and you feel like, okay, you know what, it's not going to be easy, but at least I know this now, So when you are struggling, like it's better to know that it's normal and that like it's still gonna keep going.
Yeah, or you commit yourself for the long haul.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when's the last time you cut yourself?
Oh man, it's been
Okay, it's been a while.
it's been a while.
So it gets to the point where you just go, okay, this is something that I'm going to be struggling with for my life.
Yeah.
Right? And I get to the point where I'm learning how to deal with it. I'm learning how to work with it. I'm learning how to manage this. But it's just like my tremor. I have a tremor in my hand. I just learn how to manage it. It doesn't, I've prayed, Lord, remove this, and he never has.
Yeah.
And so it gets to the point where you just go, okay, I'm learning to manage it. So your journey from January being diagnosed with, what were you diagnosed with?
Bipolar disorder and anxiety.
Okay. Oh, wow. So it gets to the point where you just go, okay, I've got to accept this. I've got to embrace this, and I got to manage this, right?
Yeah.
It gets to the point. Well, thank you so much for being part of this interview and this podcast. The thing is, I wanted to adopt you. Maybe I'll submit adoption papers to you now. So thank you so much. And if this has been encouragement, if you've known somebody, if know somebody, I think you put on the your Facebook hotlines, all these hotline numbers and stuff like that. So I'll put these hotline numbers and all stuff below this interview. So like if you're having difficulties cutting yourself, if you're having difficulties mental health, Jay is telling you it's not going to be easy. It's a journey. It's hard, but there are resources out there to help you through it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm pretty open. So even if you need a stranger to talk to, because it's hard to talk to your friends and family sometimes, I'll be that stranger. I can help redirect you to resources. I'm connected with I actually work for a nonprofit mental health agency, so a county agency. I work there right now, so we offer like therapy services and psychiatric services for adolescents, as well as like parenting classes, and we offer therapy services too for adults. And then I'm also a peer educator for a sexual assault and violence education program, so we also have really great resources there. So I'm a walking resource, so you can use me too.
You know what? More than that, you're a walking Jesus. That's what you are. You're a walking Christian that just shows importance, because the Bible says, you've done it to the least of my brothers, you've done it unto me. And that is the least of you. So you are doing God's work. I mean, just totally God's work. I'm proud of you. Stinking proud of you. Okay, God bless you. And it's good to see you guys, and have a great day. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Bye-bye.